The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Wednesday, March 26, 2025, and it is time for the Wednesday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. And we are back after a break on Monday with some more nerdy news for you as we get to the middle of your week. And we've got a follow-up on a story we talked about last week and some good news, at least it appears on that front. More streaming services for anime that fans are going to have to keep tabs on as another big title moves to a different streaming service. And a little recap of NXT from last night, and we'll wrap things up, of course, with the Empire Express at the end of the program. Joining me in studio on this Wednesday morning is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. It seems like we have several recurring topics that tend to rear their ugly heads around. If it's not OhioCon, which thankfully it isn't, it's something either streaming service related and probably something that's going to become even more common is stories that have some like tangential connection to crypto or NFTs, which, you know, who doesn't love talking about that? So, let's get into it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because the thing about these types of companies is they have a lot of money, at least initially. Whether they keep a lot of money is, still to be seen. But because of that, these are the companies that typically end up at the forefront when there need to be companies that are rescued, or if they're companies that need a big influx of cash. These are the companies that typically get turned to. So this is going to be another example of that as we're going to jump into our first story today. And that is, again, something we talked a little bit about last week that was teased, that Game Informer, one of the beloved long-running journalism outlets of video games, is making a comeback. The announcement was made yesterday, and it was a company that, as Mike said, it certainly hinted at Gunzilla Games, which is a company that seems to be on the fringe of NFT, crypto type stuff, appears to be the company that has bought them. Now, on the positive side of that news, it sounds like they've brought back most, if not all, of the staff, and they have restored a lot of the archives that were just basically ripped off the internet when the company went away. So that's certainly the good part of this. I think anytime in this era right now, especially with Google doing everything it's doing and content being buried under a bunch of AI overviews, anytime you have an outlet like this that comes back, that's a good thing. How long it's a good thing, I think, will completely depend on what the intentions of this new parent company are, and are they going to use this as a platform to push their NFT stuff and, use it up and spit it out? Like, there are certainly more questions than answers at this point, but at least initially, it's a little bit of a feel-good story as Game Informer is able to come back after kind of being taken away.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild story. Yesterday, the editor-in-chief from Game Informer, Matt Miller, came out and announced that Gunzilla Games was acquiring the rights to the magazine, which answers question one that I had last time, which was, hey, I thought GameStop owned this. What's going on? Like,
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy because the way GameStop handled getting rid of Game Informer is both, like, not terrible and terrible simultaneously.
Yeah.
Like, they could have retained the name and just used it fully AI, just churning out stories, and they didn't do that, which I think in a way is commendable.
Yeah.
But the way they just essentially made it disappear and canned the entire staff, we talked about last time the Kickstarter campaign for Electronic Gaming Monthly and the money it brought in. It's kind of indicative of where GameStop is maybe now, that they didn't see that there was still some inherent value in the Game Informer brand. And clearly this Gunzilla Games knows that there's something there. I question the long-term viability of bringing back the entire staff and running it as if it hadn't gone away to begin with. I can't imagine it's a very lucrative venture. Again, I still think your archives is where you have some value. You could really leverage that to do something. And, you have this Gunzilla Games company. the co-founder, Neil Blomkamp. He was the director of the 2009 movie District 9. He's the chief creative officer, co-founder of the company. He's doing the narrative storyline for their Off the Grid game, which is this free-to-play battle royale, NFT marketplace included game that's currently in early access. I just you hope things turn out well, but at the same time, that sounds like the kind of company that I'm not like jumping at the idea of giving my information to, even if it's for magazine delivery.
Yeah, that sounds like you're gonna be have all your information farmed if you
Yeah.
do that. That's not ideal. I you know, it's weird because GameStop, as we'll talk about, maybe not today, but as we go forward, certainly seems to be okay with getting into questionable financial space, and they're talking about getting into the crypto market. So you would have thought that maybe they would have come up with this idea first and not left it for somebody else. But the other side to it too that's kind of mind-boggling for GameStop is why you didn't at the very least just keep on a skeleton staff to write some new game reviews, even if it's a staff that's not even based here in the States, to just write things and then keep the archive up and just keep whatever traffic you're getting, because I'm sure there was at least some of people just looking for old game reviews. They just 86 the whole thing, took it all off the internet, and so at least this stuff is back. You know, the financial viability piece is obviously a big part of it. Is you know, are they counting on this site to be able to push their NFTs to a point that that's where they're going to make their money? Or is there really like an appetite for this type of stuff that they can get these gaming companies to sponsor content, and maybe rather than doing independent reviews, you're doing more like sponsored early plays where you're making some money off of that? I don't know. And that's going to be the question: is how are they making money? How do you get people to, as Mike said, can give your information up to a company that maybe isn't completely above board? I mean, not that they're doing necessarily anything illegal, but just the whole NFT space is very sketchy, and I think it does give you a little bit of pause that maybe while you would like to support Game Informer and you'd like to support the fact that they were able to give everybody their jobs back, I don't know if the parent company is going to be a long-term company that you want to get behind.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to implicate them on anything up to this point. I think it's more just the reputation that
Yeah.
anything crypto and certainly NFT related kind of gives you that feeling.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen numerous rug pulls over the years, and we've seen just the general value of NFTs go from something that was actually coveted to kind of worthless.
Yeah.
And I just I have to wonder. I think something like Game Informer and really any of those legacy game publications are something that we all look at fondly, and we would love the idea of having it around. But I just wonder how many of the people celebrating its return really cared that much about it when it was around. To me, Game Informer was just this neat little add-on to my pro membership at GameStop. It was cool that it was there. I appreciated it, but I don't know if I really appreciated it to the point where, man, it better come back, or the industry's in trouble. I just think we've moved on in so many ways from this form of games journalism, where now people are getting their news on YouTube or X or wherever, and it's a fun thing. I don't know if it's viable long term.
Well, I mean, we saw it with G4, and obviously there were other issues involved in their return. But even if there hadn't been those other issues, at the crux of it, people aren't going to tune in to watch video game reviews on television anymore. They've already got content creators or other people on the internet that they trust their opinions on games, and those are the people they're probably going to go to now. And even though maybe at one point you were a trusted source, people move on. People find the next person.
I think content creators have perfected the form. It's in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, something like G4 was fascinating because you didn't have all millions of content creators making content for the exact thing you were looking for. This was the closest thing you could get, was episodes of X-Play where they were just reviewing games, because no other channel on television at that point in time was talking video games.
Right.
It was a pretty easy victory, but now it's not only can you find someone online playing or talking about the specific game you want to hear about? But you can even take it one step further and find people that have the same opinion as you on the game that you enjoy
Yeah.
and dig that further. I just cable television and probably in a similar way, game publications can't really replicate that.
No, they can't. And again, wish them all the best. Hope
Yeah.
it is a completely above board thing and that they're really interested in bringing this back to its full editorial glory.
They're saying the right things right now.
For sure. And they could 100% have good intentions. Like you said, we're not necessarily throwing this company under the bus. Is just the whole NFT space has been very questionable, and
It's hard to not have a prove me wrong mentality toward it.
for sure. And hopefully they do. And if they do, we'll certainly talk about it on the podcast. If they don't, we'll probably also talk about it on the podcast. But we'll certainly keep an eye on this. But at least initially, some very good news. If you're a fan of Game Informer, or if you're a staff member of Game Informer, you now have a job back, which is certainly always a good thing. One other anime news, kind of moving on, and this is kind of one of those ongoing things, like Mike said, that unfortunately we have to talk about a lot. Of course, the big show that everybody's talking about, really worldwide, is Lazarus. It'll
McAlpin's.
Yes, another show named after an outdated store in the Midwest. But obviously, it was created by Shinichiro Watanabe, best known for Cowboy Bebop, and it's certainly gotten the red carpet treatment. It's going to be on Adult Swim. It's going to air almost simultaneously with the Japanese releases. So you know that this is a show that has a lot of money behind it and clearly a lot of expectations. The downside, and this is honestly to be expected when you have a show like this that clearly, Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers is putting a lot of money into when you're going to be doing these simultaneous releases, is they're going to want to, no pun intended, maximize their return on investment, as they will be streaming this anime on Max, which used to be HBO Max, but that has changed. Again, we've talked about it a lot, and this is one of those things that, first off, this show looks, really good, and I think it's going to do really well. I think it's going to be popular both in Japan and in the West. It just feels like another one of those kind of crossover shows that I think will do really well. But again, this is yet another streaming service that you're asking anime fans to have to get. Now, obviously, the difference with this one is you do have an option to watch it live, quote unquote, on TV. You can watch it. So it's not only on streaming. So that does make this a little better. You could always DVR it if you still own those things. I don't know how many people actually have a DVR in 2025. But otherwise, you're going to be having to sign up for another streaming service to check this out. And we've talked about it before. I feel like we're getting to that breaking point with anime fans, where even fans that have really been very good about supporting the industry the legal way are starting to look at their wallets and think, man, this is getting to be a little bit too expensive to try to do this the legal way.
Who's stealing from who at this point?
Correct. And so, again, I don't blame them for this. This makes total sense from a business standpoint, but from an anime fan standpoint, if you're not able to catch it live, I feel like this is not necessarily the best news.
It just makes me think of when Peacock and NBC pulled The Office from Netflix. It's like, that is obviously the right move. It's The Office. It's one of the top sitcoms ever. You're going to want it on your own streaming platform. Yeah, everyone's going to be angry, but you can't really blame them for it.
Yeah.
Again, it makes all the sense in the world. You have the Cowboy Bebop creator. You have this show that's going to be airing almost simultaneously with Japan. I have to assume there's going to be a highly overrated opening theme to it, because that seems to be how these work as well between Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo. My concern, obviously, is that, concern is probably a really strong word, because ultimately it doesn't matter to me at the end of the day. As long as the show's decent, I'll be satisfied. But I feel like you run the risk of trying to make it appeal too much to a Western audience, where it kind of loses that appeal for the established anime fan. We'll see how it goes, but I don't I want to watch it because I feel like I have to, as far as it's going to be a big deal, so I better watch it. Since
Yeah.
there have been so many other big deal shows over the years I've not watched. Uh, and to some degree, I am excited about it. I did like Cowboy Bebop.
Samurai Champloo was great. No matter what you think of the music, that show was really good.
That's what I've heard. And, I assume this one will certainly be good as well. But it's interesting, and it'll be funny to see kind of how well it performs here compared to Japan. Does it outperform in the West? But yeah, I'm not in any hurry to go out and subscribe to Max for this. I'll be honest.
Well, and one thing I mentioned before that was encouraging is that Sentai Filmworks is actually doing the dub of this, which is great to see them get a high-profile show like this. And it's not the first. We've talked about Oshinoko and some other big shows that ended up on the High Dive platform as opposed to Crunchyroll or one of 18 other platforms. So good to see them getting involved in the dub. I hope that means eventually, maybe once it first runs through Max, then maybe it ends up on High Dive.
That'd be fine
On the back end, even if it is after the season finishes. Like that's kind of my hope, that them being involved maybe is a way for them to get in the door. And if so, that's not as bad because again, you're getting a live option to watch it on TV. If it ends up eventually moving to High Dive, then you don't necessarily have to subscribe to Max. So that would be a little better news on the back end. But yeah, I think it is going to be a big deal. Whether it's going to be good and a big deal is to be seen because, also the thing about big deal shows is if they don't live up, people are going to let you know about it. And, there was pushback on Chainsaw Man. People didn't think it was a great adaptation. I think that's kind of subsided as kind of the hardcore people have moved out and the people that are just general anime fans have moved in, thought it was really good.
This one's an original production, right? There's
Correct.
No source material.
Right. So there's nothing to compare it to this time, which
got that going for it.
It's got that advantage as
I
well.
do like the fact that you mentioned Sentai getting the dub for it. I feel like there was a point in time, and probably this mentality still exists in some degree, that if you really wanted a show to do well among non-anime fans, you would bring in a Hollywood cast to do the dubbing. I feel like they've done that with a lot of like the Ghibli movies over the years. So at least they're not doing that.
Yeah, and I think that would be really difficult in this case because it is a show that's airing at the same time as Japan.
Yeah,
and
those kind of time frames would be rough for
correct. And maybe
A-tier stars.
And maybe that's why High Dive is the choice because they don't have as many dubs and you have the ability to get their actors in the studio maybe a little more often than other casts. So good for them though. Really happy for them that they're able to get the dub on this, and certainly we'll keep an eye on this. Not too far away. April 5th is when that will begin airing here in the United States. One final news article, we won't get too deep on this, but just wanted to mention NXT from last night. And I did not get to watch NXT from last night as I was working, but I think notably was something we had wondered when they announced that Stephanie Vaquer was going to be defending both of her women's championships, is whether they were setting up an out for her to lose one of those two titles. And they did not. They did. They actually did set up the out.
Well, actually.
And she overcame the odds and defended both titles, and then had to stare down with Jordan Grace to end the show, which I think everybody would be excited about that match. But I'm curious because I know you did get to watch it. Kind of your thoughts on her defending both, and any other general thoughts on the show.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously she's great, but when you have her in two matches in the same night, it really gives you this way by which you can compare the rest of the talent. And in this case, Jada Parker versus Fallon Henley. And obviously Fallon Henley's been around a lot longer as far as in the industry and in NXT, and you can kind of see it.
Yeah.
Like, I think both of them have really bright futures. I think Jada Parker has a unique charisma that a lot of the women, even on the main roster, don't possess.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to take her really far. But I think you can kind of see a little bit of rawness in her in-ring work compared to a Fallon Henley. There were times in that first match for the NXT Women's title that just was a little awkward. And I assume a lot of that has to do with Jada Parker probably hasn't wrestled someone with the style of Stephanie Vaquer all that often. And whereas Fallon Henley, that match seemed a little more fluid at times. But both were enjoyable. I enjoyed the episode as a whole, but man, sometimes NXT gets really bad about spamming the shenanigans button during matches. I think sometimes I don't need that. I just need a match.
Yeah.
Like, almost every match it felt like had some sort of outside interference or nonsense that got you to the finish, and like it just gets kind of ridiculous after a while. Um, I was good to see Lexis King retain.
Yeah.
Again, another match with nonsense with Obafemi coming out and attacking Javon Evans. Um, I kind of find the like really subtle digs at AEW to be funny as long as they remain subtle. Where you had Ricky Saints on commentary make the comment pertaining to I think really pertaining to Ethan Page and Sean Spears both, but he made the comment about, well, just add that to the list of Canadians who don't like me, which Corey was like, yeah, let's talk about that on a podcast or something sometimes. Presumably kind of a shot at Adam Copeland because of their perceived beef in AEW.
Yeah.
Yeah, NXT is still a solid show. I wish they hadn't gotten rid of the NXT women's tag titles because during Vaquer's defenses, they kept cutting back to the backstage area where you had all the women watching the match, and you're just like, you have tag teams here. Like, they should be fighting for something besides the TNA tag titles.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you mentioned all the shenanigans. I think that is the problem with their roster right now. It is too large. And you have this influx of, indie wrestlers that are, or wrestlers that have kind of been on the independents, like Vaquer and Julia and things like that, where, you've got them. And then you've got your performance center talent that are athletes that are trying to learn how to be professional wrestlers. And then you have TNA people that are kind of dropping in. Then you have main roster people that drop in. So,
yeah.
You just got so many people right now that I think it forces all of these feuds to be overbooked because you've got too many people in the feud, whether they're just dropping in to interfere to get at somebody else or they're actually involved in the storyline. It feels a little too congested. It's not as straightforward. And, sometimes it makes NXT fun and unique, and sometimes it makes it like, oh, here's another interference. And it does, over a 2-hour show kind of wear on you a little bit. The chaos, for chaos sake, works sometimes, but if you spam it, like you said, it does kind of wear on the audience a little bit.
Yeah, and I assume a lot of this is just bottlenecking due to them waiting for post-WrestleMania to make any big moves as far as women leaving NXT and moving to Raw or SmackDown, because honestly, I know they tout how great the NXT women's division is, and that's certainly true. And as a result, you don't really need Jordan Grace, Stephanie Vaquer, and Julia all at the top of your women's division.
Right.
Like, especially when you still have Roxanne Perez, you have Cora Jade, you have all these other women who are right there at the doorstep or at the top already themselves.
Yeah.
There's just too much there. Like, and I think sometimes that's at the expense of someone like, Fallon Henley wrestling for the North American title last night, but JC Jane needs to be doing something too.
For sure.
Like, she's just as good. And without tag titles, you have that group of 3 women. Only one of them seems to be doing anything.
Right. Yeah, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And, we'll see, what happens post-WrestleMania. But, yeah, there definitely needs to be kind of a reorganization, I think. And hopefully it doesn't involve people departing the company. But at some point, you've got to find a way to make your TV a little more straightforward. And to do that, you might have to move some people around to make that happen. Otherwise, it's just chaos.
I feel like they're still constantly doing new tryouts.
Yeah.
And you're going to run out of spaces for people, as they always do.
Yeah, they can't just keep creating new shows and
No.
putting people on there. At some point, the law of diminishing returns kicks in as far as that goes. But solid NXT, certainly. If you haven't had a chance, you can check that out sometime this week, I believe, on the CW app. Ready to wrap this thing up?
Let's go.
All right, this is the Empire Express, where we run through some quick stories to wrap up the podcast. At Anime Japan 2025, 6 more cast members were announced for the new Hell Teacher Nube, which will premiere in July. In addition, a new manga series called Jigoku Sensei Nube Kai will launch in Saikyo Jump on May 2nd. It's great to see this property getting so many new titles, right?
Yeah, I don't know why it took so long, but I'm really hoping this leads to the original anime finding some easily accessible home for me to watch it from, as I'd love to start there.
Yeah.
Read the synopsis of the new manga. It sounds ridiculous about him going through time and space to save his students, but kind of cool that for the new anime, they brought back the original voice actor for Nube to reprise his role, so kind of excited for that. One of the worst games of all time is making a comeback on Steam. At least that's the way Game Rant is selling it. Big Rigs Over the Road Racing will soon be releasing on the online storefront. It can't be worse than ET, right?
I kind of want to play it to find out because I played ET and I know how bad that was. It's hard to imagine this game could possibly be worse than that. That sounds like a bold claim, but obviously they're based it on Steam ratings in the past. But kind of curious to see if this game gets a streaming resurgence of people wanting to play it just to see how good or how bad it actually is. In anime concert news, Anime Expo announced it will host its World Matsuri on July 3rd. The Peacock Theater in Los Angeles. Performers include Grand Rodeo, Flo, Hiroshi Kitadani, Sakurazaka 46, Toganashi Togeiri, and Asterism. Sounds like a pretty good show, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems like the amount of artists coming over here to perform live is just getting greater and greater every year, which I'm really excited about. Wouldn't mind seeing Grand Rodeo, Flo, or Hiroshi Kitadani. Toganashi Togiari had one of my favorite anime songs from last year, so that would also be really cool. But yeah, you're excited to see it. In more concert news, Anna Mazement announced Tuesday that the former vocalist for Stereo Pony, Aimi, will be performing at the Raleigh, North Carolina convention this May. This sounds must-see, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild. I know, you've watched several shows that Stereo Pony's done the music for. It's really awesome to see her continuing on. And, yeah, I mean, Anna Mazement's done a great job of bringing in Japanese guests, although a lot of the ones they had announced to this point kind of felt like the same people they always bring back, which they're really entertaining. So, but this is kind of a step outside that box, and I think that concert should do really well. Finally, Chrono Trigger surpassed a big gaming milestone. The game has sold more than 5 million copies. Seems well-deserved for what's considered one of the greatest games of all time.
Well-deserved and honestly kind of lower than I would have imagined. Since 1995, the game's been released on Super Nintendo, PlayStation, DS, iOS, Android, Windows, etc. A week or so ago, you could get it on Steam for like $4. So to me, the fact that we're just now surpassing 5 million seems kind of surprising. But yeah, I hope the anniversary and celebrating this sales milestone will make the industry realize that you can create a compelling game and not spend $500 million doing it.
For sure, and I have to wonder if the 30th anniversary stuff will maybe drive more people to go to Steam and pick up the game that have been hearing about it for years and want to give it a shot. Maybe that's what's bumping sales up again.
Certainly could have been. I think the sale's over now, but man, like even at the regular price of like $15, it's still a great game.
For sure. If you haven't checked it out and you're a fan of RPGs, definitely encourage you to check that out. And we are going to check out on this Wednesday morning. You're all caught up on your midweek news. We'll be back on Friday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time with a Friday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. And then we'll be back on Sunday for another edition of the Hard Rock Empire, the music of March the 14th coming up this week on the podcast. That'll be 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Hope you'll join us for that. Big thanks to Mike for joining me in the studio. Big thanks to everyone for listening, whether you've listened to us live or on the VOD. We appreciate you. The follows, join the Discord, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. We'll be back on Friday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time with another edition of the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.